Good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, November the 5th, 2025, and this is our series Life Lessons. And I was tempted to tell our camera operator to label it not only for a life lessons, but also for an Israel update because it really is on the borderline. You may not have noticed it unless maybe you're like me and you look at your uh, memories section on your social media feed. Uh, I did that this morning, and it occurred to me that one of the first things that popped up was a post I put on last year about getting up early and being at the polling place a good 45 minutes before the polls were going to open. That my niece and I were numbers 17 and 18 in line because, of course, 1 year ago today was the presidential election. And by the time we cast our ballots and started to leave, the line literally stretched out of the polling place way down the breezeway to the other side of the campus at the community college, which is where our polling place is located. Why were so many people showing up and standing in line for hours on end? Because it was an important election 1 year ago today. Fast forward to 2025, and even though it's not in our area, it is going to affect the entire country. What happened in the localized election for the mayor of New York. Already this morning, some officials, for example, the fire chief for the city of New York, has already resigned, doesn't want to be around when the new administration comes in because he recognizes that his department will be in jeopardy. There's a debate going on right now. You can see it all over the media and social media types. People wondering whether perhaps they should stay or whether businesses should relocate, whether people who have wealth should relocate before someone comes in and tries to take everything they've spent their lives building. And particularly within the Jewish community, because a lot of people don't know, but some do, that New York City is the home to the largest Jewish population in the entire world outside of the state of Israel. And with the election, some people are beginning to wonder, should we stay and try to defend our freedoms and defend our rights in this country to worship God and to go to school? Because, they've already had lots of instances where people are being harassed on college campuses for the last year and a half before the election. A lot of protesters were showing up trying to make it impossible for Jewish students in universities throughout the country to be able to even go to classes. And now someone who is very openly proud of his heritage and who refuses to recant from his global jihad stances of the past, refuses to repudiate it, is now the mayor-elect of the city that's got the largest Jewish population in the world outside of the state of Israel. Should they stay? Should they go? And I'm reminded of history because I'm obviously too young to remember World War II. I was not born until well after the war was over with. My parents were the World War II generation. My own dad was part of a military unit that liberated one of the smaller concentration camps. And so I've always considered myself to be a secondary eyewitness because as we got up old enough to be teenagers and to understand a little bit about it, Dad would allow us to see some of the photographs that he brought home, and he would talk a little bit about what he had experienced, but only up to a point. In part, he was trying to shield his family from the horrors of war that he had personally experienced. And in part, he didn't want to keep reliving the trauma himself. So he would talk about it because he wanted us to understand that evil is real and that humanity is capable of extraordinary levels of wickedness, because he wanted us to not only appreciate the freedoms that we have as Americans, but to understand that yes, there's a time to be the peacemaker, but there's also a time to defend, and sometimes war is necessary, and he wanted us to learn those lessons. And so people right now are going to have to make some choices, and I hope they make wise choices. The Bible is full of examples of people who had to decide for personal instances, for national reasons, when it was time to stay, when it was time to go. Abraham, living his life in Ur of the Chaldees, gets a call from God to leave his country, his culture, leave your family behind, except for, of course, obviously, God never intends to break up a husband and wife relationship. Leave your family of idol worshipers and go to this land I'm going to show you. Abraham had to decide whether he was going to obey what he clearly understood to be God's voice, or whether he was going to do things his way and stay put. If he stays put, we never hear of Abram or Sarai. We never know them as Abraham and Sarah. We never know those people, because God would have raised up someone else. It's been just under 40 years ago. I was on a mission trip, summer mission trip, with my home church as a college student. And we had construction work that we were doing during the daytime to build a Christian camp. But on the weekends, we were going to some of the local churches scattered near this resort area to proclaim the gospel and to share something with those churches about what our mission there was and how we hoped it would be used for God's glory. And this particular Sunday, we had 9 churches that had invited our missions team to come. But we only had 8 adult or college age males. 9 places that need somebody to speak, 8 people. There was a gap. The guy who was the deacon chair of our church, who also happened to be on the mission trip, asked me to be the 9th speaker. And the place that I was being assigned to was a fledgling church that was meeting outside of a resort area where the fishermen would come up on Sunday mornings and they'd get their bait and whatever else they were going to be eating and drinking while they were spending the day out there on the lake on the boat. But this fledgling church was meeting there, and that's where they wanted me to go and speak. I'm a college student myself. I'm fine teaching Sunday school. I don't mind helping out in the nursery when it's my turn of singing in the choir, but you want me to do what? You see, sometimes you have to decide whether you want to stay in what may be your comfort zone or go to a place that might not be comfortable. It's not always fleeing persecution. It might be a case of, I just want to stay because this fits and feels right to me. And that deacon chairman just looked me in the eye and said, it's entirely possible that you're God's first choice. And if you don't go, He'll raise somebody else up, because God's not going to leave people without a valid witness. But this is your chance to go with God. So I wound up going and doing the service that day, even though it was way outside of anything that I'd ever been asked to do before. You know, I've been going to church all my life and seeing other people stand up and deliver the message. And I'd taught in classroom settings, but This was a Sunday service at an outdoor chapel next to a bait shop in a resort. Staying or going. Not just Abraham choosing to go and follow God. Jacob, when he gets the word that Joseph, whom he thought had been dead for 20 years, is not only alive and well, but he's the number 2 person in all of Egypt. Jacob's got to make a decision. Do I want to stay here in the land that I know God has promised to my father and my grandfather, and therefore it's the inheritance for me and my kids, but it's not livable right now? Or do I go down to Egypt? Do I really want to believe that there's hope and a future for me, even temporarily someplace else? He makes the decision to go. And he and his family will stay and be well cared for during his lifetime and during Joseph's lifetime. But Genesis ends up with Jacob has passed. His family has carried him back to the promised land to bury him in the family tomb next to his grandparents and his parents and his wife Leah. And the kids go back to Egypt because Joseph's still there, the famine's still going on, they still have work to do. Years later, when Joseph is nearing the end of his life, he makes his family promise. The day's going to come when God's going to fulfill his promises to us. And when that happens, don't leave my body here in Egypt. Carry my body back with you. And he even told them exactly where he wanted them to make his permanent grave, in a plot of land near a well that his father had given him decades before when he was still a teenage boy. He wanted to go and be buried in the place of his inheritance. The disciples, you go to the New Testament. Jesus tells them, you wait in Jerusalem until I send that Holy Spirit. And then you're going to be my witnesses. Where? First of all, in Jerusalem, a place they are very familiar with and comfortable in some ways, even though they'll have to stand up to the religious establishment and still deal with Rome. Then you're going to be my witnesses in Judea, then Samaria, then to the utmost parts of the earth. They had to make a decision. When to stay, how long to stay, and when it was time to go. Here's why I think that today's life lessons could also be quite legitimately categorized as the Israel Update series that we've been doing since October the 7th of 2023, a little over 2 years ago, because the people who were living in Israel on their side of the border in the kibbutzes knew that they were close to the border. They knew that there had been rocket attacks. They always had to be within 15 seconds reach of a bomb shelter anywhere they were at. Their kids on a playground had to be within steps of a bomb shelter. They knew there was danger nearby. But they were choosing to live and claim their land because they were on their side of the border when they were brutally attacked. We know from biblical prophecy that in the end times, Israel is going to be attacked, that all the nations will either turn a blind eye or at least just put up verbal, feeble protests. We can see that clear as a bell, for example, in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, a prophesied event that has not happened yet, but it looks like it's getting very, very close. How do you decide whether you stay or you go? Back in the 1930s, when Adolf Hitler was voted into office, people saw some danger signs. They saw some more danger signs. Some people tried to leave. Some people successfully managed to leave. Others, by the time they realized danger was ahead, and they now desperately were looking for some place to get out, They weren't being accepted. One of the most famous incidents of that period of time involves a ship called the USS St. Louis. It was a ship that left Germany with people who had paid high prices for passage, safe passage out of Germany. They were supposed to go to Cuba. The Cuban government had agreed to let them come and immigrate there. But when they got to Cuba, enough Germans had arrived and influenced the government of Cuba to where they went back on their word. The captain of the ship is now he's sailing up and down the coast of South America, Central America, and yes, the United States and Canada. He's looking for a place to safely offload his passengers. But no one would take them in. Ultimately, the ship wound up returning to Germany, and many of the people who had paid thinking that they were escaping in time wound up as prisoners in the concentration camps, and many of them did not survive, though some survived at the end of the war. How do you know, whatever it is that God's telling you to do, when is it time for you personally to stay and try to fix a problem within your church, try to heal a marriage relationship, try to heal a family dispute? When do you need to find another job? When do you need to move from the place that you've called home, seeking a better life? That you can look for the scriptural principles, and you should look for the scriptural principles on what it is God is calling you to do, how you can best be a servant of God, how you can protect and provide for your families, because people who are adults and they have children or they have elderly and disabled in their family, they have a moral responsibility to care for their relatives. And while you might be willing to put yourself at risk, you don't want to leave your defenseless loved ones in harm's way. The Bible is our source book for our questions and our answers. We look to what God's Word says to the individual stories like your Abrahams or your Josephs or those 12 apostles or Paul on his missionary journeys, any number of examples you've got in life of people who have to make the decision, when is it right to stay? When is it time to go? And you bathe it in prayer. Thanks for watching.